Hello and
There you
welcome
go.
to everyone tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. Welcome to Community Table Talk. I am very excited to introduce our guest today, who is John Percy, and he is from Waterloo Fire Rescue. So welcome, John. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. And today's discussion, we'll be talking about fire prevention and Fire Prevention Week. And before we get into it, as always, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. And I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I host this from today, which is Waterloo Region, is the land traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. I also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. So, John, to start us off, why don't we talk a little bit broadly about what is Fire Prevention Week in North America?
Well, that's great. And that's a great question. So, Fire Prevention Week in North America has been around since 1922. And it's an opportunity for fire departments throughout North America, this special week, to really push home fire and life safety. So, a little bit of history on how Fire Prevention Week came to be in North America. So, way back when, on October 8th of 1871, there was the Great Chicago Fire to our neighbors down in the south. And it caused devastating damage to the entire city, which resulted then more than 250 people dying. It left over 100,000 people homeless, destroyed over 17,000 structures, and burned over 2,000 acres of land. So that kind of started in our world of fire and life safety. That was the catalyst that started it. And as I said, since 1922 in North America, Fire Prevention Week was created. And again, the campaign is to educate everyone in their communities during this special week on home fire and life safety.
And when we're talking about this special week, what are the time frame around this week? And I heard that there's themes around every year. Like, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, Fire Prevention Week in North America is typically the first full week of October. So, this year it's October 3rd to 9th, and every year they have a different theme campaign. So, the theme of this Fire Prevention Week for this year is Learn the Sounds of Fire Safety. So, it's an opportunity for all the fire departments in the region and in Ontario and North America to educate homeowners on fire safety. So, as I mentioned with the theme, Learn the Sounds of Fire Safety, we're trying to educate and remind all the homeowners the importance of learning the sounds of smoke and carbon monoxide alarms, knowing the different sounds between them, and knowing when there's a problem with their alarms.
Yeah, this is just so important, not only for our homeowners and our property managers, but all of their tenants and members that are in these buildings as well. I mean, this information is just so life-saving to get out there. So again, thank you for taking the time to talk with us about this. And I do want to encourage any of our housing providers watching to share this with their tenants and members as well, just to get this information out as broadly as we can. Mhm. So going into, excuse me, some of the causes, what are the most common causes of fires in Ontario?
That's a great question, Danelle. So, in the province of Ontario, there are many leading causes of fires where people live, regardless if it's a townhouse, an apartment, a condo, where there's injuries and death. And unfortunately, the leading cause of fires, and I'm just going to get my little prop here, are basically pots on the stove. So, kitchen fires is the leading causes of fires in Ontario, and specifically when pots are left unattended. So, this is the number one. Other leading causes of fires in the province of Ontario where we live include smoking. So still a lot of people do smoke in their home. Electrical fires, so either electrical wiring or electrical appliances. And even though we're in October, we do see still a lot of barbecue fires outside with cooking. So those are some of the kind of leading fires in the province of Ontario today.
And I think that's probably going to be a surprise for a lot of folks because when we think of, fire starting in a unit, I know prior to the education that we've received from you guys, I always thought it was careless smoking. That is kind of the where my head goes, or, if somebody leaves a candle burning. But for
Mhm.
something like a pot on the stove, that can happen to any of us. If we get careless, if we forget, that's something that could so commonly happen, especially if you have kids or pets, or, our lives are so busy right now. Mhm.
You're exactly right. And the challenges in our society today, we're always multitasking. So I could have the kids in one room, I could be cooking in the kitchen, I've got my smartphone or my laptop going, I could have to answer the door. And that's our biggest challenge. So we're even pre COVID 19, before the COVID 19 world, pots on the stove were the leading causes of fire. So we want to remind everyone watching that when you're cooking, you need to stay in the kitchen at all times. If you need to leave for whatever reason, take the pot, put it on a different element, turn the stove off. Biggest thing with pots on the stove fires, if these ever catch on fire, the best way to put them out is take your oven mitt. We want to have one of those always handy. It's a good reminder that I have a pot on the stove, and also to protect your hand so it doesn't burn. Then I take my lid, which is the right size for my pot. So I'm going to take my oven mitt to protect my hand. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide my lid over the pot, and that will actually take away the oxygen of the fire. If I take the lid off, the fire starts up again. So we want to remind everyone, if this ever catches on fire, this is the best way to put it out. If for some reason you panic or you're not sure, we always tell people, you know what? Get out of the kitchen, get out of your townhouse or your unit, close the door behind you, follow the emergency procedures, call 911 from a safe area. If you know how to use a portable fire extinguisher, I'll get you one of those. If you're aware, if your building has these and you know where they are and you know how to use them, please use one of these portable fire extinguishers. If in doubt, everyone, just follow the emergency procedures in the building. What I don't want you to do, please, if there's anything I need you to remember with this, do not put water in this when this is on fire, because any kind of grease or oil will ignite. You'll have an instant explosion. You'll be severely burned. The kitchen will be severely impacted. So please, whatever you do, don't put water in it. If you panic, everyone, and you're just not sure what to do, just leave it alone. Get all your family and loved ones out. Close the door behind you. Follow the emergency procedures. If you're in your private house or a townhouse, call 911 from outside, and don't ever go back inside for any reason.
Why are we closing the door behind us? Why is that important?
Really good question. So what we're trying to do when a fire does start is we're trying to maximize the amount of time that people have to get to a safe area, either outside or away from the fire. So by closing the door to your unit, or closing the door, let's say the fire started in a bedroom. By closing the door, that contains the fire, and it'll give you more time to get out, less time that it's going to spread the fire before you become impacted. So we always tell people, as you leave a fire, close the door behind you. That will keep the fire in there. It will give you, your loved ones, and other people in like an apartment building more time to get to a safe area.
Perfect. Yeah. And that is also speaking to the importance of when you're doing unit inspections as a property manager or a landlord. If your doors in apartment buildings have those automatic closing devices, just making sure those work on every door. And if it doesn't, then getting maintenance out there as soon as possible.
And that's a very
Mhm.
good point, Dennis. So those arms that close the doors automatically, they're actually required under the Province of Ontario Fire Code that maintains a minimum level of fire and life safety in every building and home in the province. And again, that actually speaks volumes to the what we call compartmentalization of a fire. So automatically, if you have those installed on your doors, they will keep the doors closed behind you as you leave. The thinking is that the fire will stay in that unit. It will give people down the hallway and other units more time to get to a safe area. It will contain the fire so the smoke and the heat doesn't get out into the hallway. So that's a really good point.
So if a fire does happen, and unfortunately, we're talking a lot about, the safety procedures and making sure you get out, but I assume there's lots of scenarios where folks don't get out in time. So during COVID, has there been any change in the number of fire-related deaths?
Really good question. So hopefully COVID is the worst behind us. We're hoping at this point in October this year. Yes, we got the fingers crossed. So we hope it's behind us. But in 2020, we did see a huge increase in fire deaths in the province of Ontario. We ended up with 114 fire deaths in the province. Now, in relation to COVID, that may not sound a lot, but typically in the province of Ontario, pre and post COVID-19, we would typically see about 80 fatalities of people dying in home fires. We saw a huge increase in March and April of 2020. And if everyone will just put on our memory bank when we went into the provincial lockdown and everyone was at home, part of that was more people are at home. There was more cooking occurring, more smoking, and let's call it what it is. More medication being used in the home, more alcohol consumption and drug use. So those factors increased the amount of fire fatalities. Currently in 2021, we have also seen an increase in fire deaths. We are hoping as we go through post COVID-19 and we get back to the post normal, I guess if that's what you'd like to call it, we're hoping that we see less fatalities. We also did see initially more fires that involved hand sanitizers when this first started because our governments were telling us to use them to minimize COVID. We did see more fires regarding the use of hand sanitizer because they all alcohols based. Another thing that we're actually seeing as well, and hopefully it's behind us now, is that people were putting their medical masks in the oven or the microwave to clean and sanitize. So just got to keep in mind, folks, that if you're still wearing a medical mask for the effects of COVID, keep in mind that the very top of it has a little metal clip to give you a proper seal in there. Whatever you do, if you're going to continue to wear these and clean these, please do not put them in a microwave or an oven as part of the cleaning process. Just follow the instructions. But we did see in that. So hopefully we're hoping now with the COVID-19 majority of it behind us is that we will see less fires, but there has been an impact during the COVID times.
And that's something I would have never thought of, because we were seeing, like, how do you reuse masks that are generally disposable? And I did hear about it, like, put them in the microwave, put them in the oven. And I had never even thought of that. Especially, I mean, if you're spraying alcohol on them to sanitize them and then putting them in the oven, that can
That's right.
create huge issues.
So it's interesting in the COVID time, and we would have never brought this to anyone's attention if COVID didn't exist. But it's a factor that in COVID, and we've got the provincial and federal government saying we need you to wear a mask to minimize COVID, use hand sanitizers, which is great, but people need to keep in mind those are alcohol, which can catch on fire. So again, if you are still continue to use alcohol-based hand sanitizers, we need people to remember that after you apply it on your hands, give it a minute to dry. Do not take that cigarette right away and light a cigarette, because that will start a fire. Do not take your hand to any kind of heat source like your stove or your oven, because that alcohol will ignite. So it's some of the effects of COVID that I think it'd be fair to say that we would probably not be talking about masks in a microwave or oven if we didn't have COVID. But as a fire service in the city of Waterloo, in the region of Waterloo, the province, we have been watching the trends, and these are just two trends due to the COVID-19 situation that occurred worldwide.
And then outside of COVID, maybe just kind of in general, do you have any safety tips or advice for folks on preventing fires in the home?
Very good question. So first and foremost, everyone watching, I'm just going to bring you this nice prop. This is a smoke alarm that is required. Doesn't matter if I live in a townhouse or an apartment. If I live in a house, I need one of these on every single floor of my house. Typically an apartment, if your apartment is just one floor, I just need one of these in the hallway near my sleeping areas. So first and foremost, it is actually the law in Ontario to make sure that you have these. If you're responsible for these in your unit, you always want to test them once a month. There's actually a little test button there. If it's not your responsibility, and it comes back to a superintendent, property manager, bring it to their attention if you're having any difficulties with these, and they'll replace them for you. These have a shelf life. They're usually good for about 10 years. So again, if you are responsible to maintain those, and I'll bring this up nice and close to you, and I don't know if you can see, there's an expiry date on there. Can you see that, Danila?
Yep, replaced in 2022.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. So these, everyone watching, these have a shelf life. They're required by law. Depending where you live, You may require a working carbon monoxide alarm. It depends. Maybe in the apartments, it may not apply. It depends on the conditions there. But if you have a fuel fire appliance, typically like my furnaces, my water heaters, if they're run by gas, I'm going to need one of these in the hallway near my bedroom. So as we already mentioned, we talked about cooking fires. So we want to remind everyone, when you're cooking, stay in the kitchen at all times. When it comes to electrical fires, one thing that we do really promote, and I'll bring this to you, this is a power bar. We recommend that people use this versus extension cords, assuming you need more electrical outlets, because this is a cause of fires. Candles, and I get it, everybody, you know what? We love to use candles where we reside. They smell pretty. They bring in, I like to relax. They bring in romance and relaxation to my home environment. We don't say you can't use real candles, but if you're going to, keep them away from pets and little boys and girls from hands so they can't get at them. Keep them away from drapes and curtains. These ones that I have here that I'm showing you are actually battery operated, so they're a little safer. As well, in the home environment, if you do have matches and lighters, like this one here, just keep in mind, little boys and girls don't know the difference between this of what it's supposed to be used for. They may think it's a toy. These are actually a fire safety tools. So if you're going to have this in your home environment, keep them up nice and high in a shelf or a cupboard so little boys and girls can't get at them. And finally, we always promote a home fire drill, regardless if you live in a townhouse or an apartment. Very important. Our smoke alarms are the first line of defense. They're going to go off if there is a small little fire. It should give you lots of time to get to a safe area. If you live in a townhouse environment, we do highly recommend that you get yourself out as soon as you can. Get yourself to a meeting place. So it could be the neighbor's house. It could be the tree down the street. But when we talk about that, you always want to ensure that you have two exits out. So in a townhouse, my one exit could be my front door. The second could be a back door. Now in apartment buildings, it's a little different. And I'm just going to show you that in apartment buildings, we would typically have these emergency procedures posted near the exit stairwells. So this is just an example of what you may see, these signages here. So everyone watching, it's so important that if you reside in an apartment building, no two exits out. There should be two separate stairwells to get out. Now, here's the thing. In apartment buildings, if you hear the fire alarm system go off in your building, you have to decide immediately, am I going to leave my unit or am I going to stay? Now, the decision is up to you, because in the middle of the night and you're tired and you're fast asleep, your reaction time is going to be slower. If I'm under any medication or if I'm not feeling well, I may not be so apt to be leaving as easily. And the other consideration is maybe I can't do the stairs very easily in the event of a fire emergency. In Ontario, we do not recommend the use of an elevator in the event of a fire emergency. So you have to consider, well, could I do the stairs? That you have to look at your own personal condition, that if you can or not. If you decide to stay in your unit, the best thing to do is keep your door closed in your apartment unit that comes from the hallway. At the bottom of the door, put extra towels, bed sheets, anything so that the smoke doesn't come into my unit. Then you want to get yourself to fresh air. So open a window in your bedroom. If you have a balcony, open it up for fresh air. If you do decide to leave, again, know the nearest exit stairwell. You start to go down the exit. If you encounter smoke, get out into the hallway, go across to the other exit stairwell and get down. I would strongly recommend that when it comes to residing in an apartment building, that you are aware of the emergency procedures like the ones I just showed you here. I would also suggest that if you have any questions, reach out to your property manager or the superintendent or any staff, because they can provide you with a copy of these procedures that are specifically for your building. So we talked about some fire safety tips and hazards where you reside. Most important is, everyone watching, please know two ways out, that if you do discover a fire, that you have two ways to get out. Or if you're in a building that has a fire alarm system, you need to know what the steps are, that when the fire alarm system goes off, of what I should do to keep safe.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that housing providers are probably going to run into is that monthly fire alarm testing that you brought up at the beginning. I think that lots of folks, when I worked in property, it was just a constant call every month about you're scaring my dog, you're scaring my cat, you're annoying me. So let's hear it from you. Why is it important to test it once a month?
So just to let everyone know, the Province of Ontario Fire Code does regulate the amount of fire drills and that have to be done in a building. In a building that has a fire alarm system, now townhouses would only typically have smoke alarms. They may be battery operated, they may be electric like the ones I have here. It's a little different, everyone watching, when I'm in an apartment building that has a fire alarm system. The Province of Ontario Fire Code regulates that that fire alarm system must be tested monthly. And we're not doing it here to make the residents' lives difficult and to aggravate them. It's being done because the Province of Ontario Fire Code dictates that. It's the law in Ontario. This is a regulation that is enforceable by every fire department in the province, not just locally or regional, but across Ontario. We have a document that has to be enforced. And the concept behind it is we want to ensure that those systems are working so that if there ever is a fire and a true emergency, it's going to be working when you need it most. So yes, I realize it's aggravating, but it is a requirement in the fire code, everyone watching. We're not just doing it to cause you aggravation. It is actually part of the code, which is law in our province.
Yeah, it is not up to the individual landlord. It is not up to the property manager. It is dictated by law. They need to do it. And, you know, if that means that during that time, if you have sensitivities to noise, talk to your property manager and say, hey, if you're scheduling it for this time, do you mind letting me know so I can step out? Because, you know, whatever hearing or sensitivity you may have.
You're exactly right. And if anyone has any questions, they can always reach out to their local fire department, and we can enforce the fact that for that building. And typically, apartment buildings will have approved fire safety plans that have been reviewed and approved by the local fire service. And it will actually say it right in there as well that under the approved fire safety plan, which is required under the fire code, that these maintenance testings have to be done on a regular basis.
So then when we're talking about fire safety plans, home fire escape plans, why are they important to have and why are they important to practice?
Really good point. So it's if we look at our boys and girls at, and it's interesting. I've been when I do presentations with our little boys, and pre-COVID-19, we would be in the schools, and hopefully with post-COVID-19, we're back in the schools when I do presentations. It's actually code in the Ontario Fire Code that the schools do fire drills so many times throughout a school year, and the reason we do that is so that people understand what they are, but more importantly, they practice it. And what we find as human beings with human behavior, the more we do something, the better we're going to be prepared if we ever have it. I hope we never have a fire where you live, but you need to be prepared for the fire. So you need to have two ways out. So practicing fire drills is a requirement in the schools in the province of Ontario under the fire code. We do highly recommend it that where you reside, that you have it as well, because we want you to be prepared that if you hear the fire alarm system go off, or if there is a fire and you discover it, you need to know what to do. As humans, we're a habit, we practice. The more we practice something, the better prepared we will be in the event of any kind of emergency. So it is highly recommended that in the townhouses that you have it as well. In apartment buildings, it will be regulated. And again, everyone watching, practice makes perfect and it makes people prepared. And I think it's fair to say we have been into instances where the fire alarm system is going off and people are just standing around in the lobby. They don't know what to do. Again, everyone, if you live in an apartment setting, assuming the building has an approved fire safety plan, if you don't know what the emergency procedures are, please reach out to their property manager, the superintendent. They will have copies of that. And again, it's like everything else. We want you to have the knowledge base so that if it ever does go off. And the other thing to keep in mind as well, we don't want people to get lax that if they hear the fire alarm go off and just think automatically it's another false alarm. And that's where we can get into a lot of trouble. So those are some of the requirements of why it's so important to follow the emergency procedures and to practice them with you and your family on a regular basis.
Mhm. And I like that previously you brought up the point that it can happen at any time. If you're sleeping, if you take medications, if, you've gone out the night before and had a few drinks or whatever have you, if you have any kind of impairment at all and you find yourself in this kind of situation, the more you practice, the more it becomes second nature, the easier it will be for you to follow the necessary steps.
You're exactly right. As humans, we want people to practice, to be aware, because you're exactly right. We don't know when it's going to happen. Our data will say most fires occur in the dinner hour, obviously when we're cooking, and then overnight, obviously when we're sleeping. And we have to keep in mind, for most of us, you know what, if we're sleeping in the middle of the night, we're more vulnerable to a fire condition. If it starts, our reaction time is slower. Yes, I could have alcohol in my system. I could be under the influence of prescribed medication or drugs, and that slows down my reaction time. So really important to keep that in mind. And again, unfortunately, with in 2020, we did see a lot of fire fatalities. We're hoping with post COVID-19 that goes down. But again, this is a great opportunity to remind people of the importance of home fire safety. It doesn't matter where you reside, if it's in a townhouse, an apartment, it's so important because again, majority of the fires that occur in the province of Ontario occur where we live, anywhere. So that's where we're highest at risk. And that's why we need smoke alarms, we need emergency procedures and everything that we talked about here today.
Absolutely. So John, just keeping an eye on the time here, it looks like we're coming to a close. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you think is important for either housing providers or tenants or members, community watching to know?
That's great. Well, you will get some resources here, everybody, after this program. Here in the city of Waterloo, we do have a Google Classroom that has a lot of good resources when it comes to home fire and life safety. Always keep in mind, everyone watching, please take this serious because we do have a lot of fires in the province. Again, majority of the fires occur where we reside. If you have any questions about fire safety where you live, first and foremost, reach out to your property manager or superintendent first. Give them the opportunity to respond. They can give you information. If you still need more information from that, after that point, contact your local fire department here in the region of Waterloo. Ask for the fire prevention office. It's the fire prevention office. They're the folks that enforce the Ontario Fire Code for fire safety in their municipalities. If you're here in the city of Waterloo, you can always give us a call at 519-884-2121. Please check us out on our website. Our website is www.waterloo.ca/fire. You can follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @Waterloo_fire. And again, if you have any specific questions for your municipality, please reach out to them. I represent here the City Waterloo Fire Rescue. I'm not illegally permitted to provide commentary on behalf of the other fire departments in the region of Waterloo. So wherever you live, please contact your local fire service and they'll be able to help you further.
Wonderful. I will include those links down in the description of our YouTube recording as well. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate you taking the time and hopefully this provided some new information for the folks watching.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. Be safe, everybody, post COVID-19. Let's keep the fingers crossed that we continue to do better. I wish all of you a great day. Thank you for joining us. Be safe, stay positive, and we'll see you then.